happy Earth Day. What a beautiful day. So happy Earth Day to all of you from Windsor Historical Society.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about urban forestry. We have urban forestry, then we have our natural forests. Every town in the state of Connecticut has a tree warden. It's a state statute, and they have to be a qualified tree warden. They either have to be a licensed arborist or take the coursework that we offer for these folks to be up to speed. We also have continuing education courses. Windsor's very fortunate that we have our own tree crew that enables us to manage our forests here. Our main role as a tree warden is to minimize liability. What I do every year is I do a windshield survey. I drive down all the streets. I go into the open space areas. I go to our schools, our parks. I do a survey of all the trees to look for hazards that are in the trees. When we see the hazards, and we identify them, we prioritize when our tree crew takes those hazards down. I've seen in the recent years in Windsor that, and you will notice, is that during a storm, when we have storms and trees come down, 99.9% of the trees that are coming down come down from private land. They don't come down from our land because we manage that forest, so that won't happen. Our other role is to maximize the urban canopy. If you look behind you and you look at the forest that's down there by the river, all those trees, I ask you, how do those trees get there? How do all those trees grow there? Does someone answer that? It's natural. It's a natural forest succession. Now when we get into the urban climate and we look over here, how do trees get there? What happens when that tree dies and that tree dies and that tree dies? Replant and there's no more trees. So part of my role is to maximize the urban canopy, and we do that with a replacement tree program. Harvey Hillcrest area, we did the whole street over, took a lot of those old growth silver maples down, and we replanted the trees, some on private property, some on public property. State law allows us to plant 10 feet off our right-of-way. So we did a replacement program there. Here, with a monument and being a historical area, I will be planting one tree behind the statue here and one tree up that end. And the only reason I'm doing that is because this tree's going to have to come down, soon. And we want to have a replacement program here. I'll be putting sugar maples in, right tree, right place. The reason I'm planting sugar maples is that they're not salt hardy. And right now we don't put any more sand in the roads, we put salt down. So any of the sugar maples that are near the road are susceptible to salt injury. And the other reason is, this is the southern part of their growth range. They're a cold weather tree. With the climatic warming, it's having more of a stressful effect on it. So we'll be putting the two sugar maples here, but that's Windsor. When you see Corey Lynn's building over there, the beautiful sugar maple over there, when the flowers, when the leaves come out in the fall, it's a signature that it's fall time. So we plant those trees for that reason. And then if you follow me this way here, because I do know all my trees in town. When I get a call that a tree's down in Windsor, I pretty much know what type of tree it is. I've actually worked with the town. I've been employed for 37 years this March, so I get to know them all. We can probably see it here. There's a young tree that's between the building and here. It's an ash tree. When we put the playscape in the back of Milo Peck here, that small ash tree was growing in there. So some of the workers took it out and stuck it in the field over there. And maybe this 8-9 years ago, so that tree's taken off. So that would be a replacement tree or our succession that we do it. And I really have to credit our town manager, Peter Souza. After conversation with him, he started realizing that our trees in our town are part of our infrastructure. It's just like our roads. To pave our roads once every 25 years, it costs us $1 million a year to manage that infrastructure. Our catch basins, our street lights, our buildings. He started identifying trees as being part of that infrastructure, and he allocates money so we can replace the trees in our town. I'd like to walk over to that one red maple tree by the road, and I'll show you now. From myself as a tree warden and identifying hazards, I just noticed the one just now on the front side of the tree here. There's a branch that's hanging down. It's still connected, but that tree I'll have our crews remove, just because I can see that tree has a weak branch on it. What I want to do is I want to show you a cavity that's on this side of the tree, on the right side. And I've been monitoring these trees here for these particular ones here probably for 7 or 8 years. We did have 2 removed by Eversource, one right there where that bare spot is and one here. But when I see a cavity in a tree like this, I start viewing it. I have to determine how long that tree can stay and how it will do, and that's what we do.
Can it be sealed?
Sealing it won't do any good because we found out that it used to seal the trees. There's still a few around with a brick and the concrete in, but that has no effect on the tree healing itself. It heals itself from within.
Is the cable internalized?
Yes, it's inside there. And as a matter of fact, when there used to be water in the trees, they used to drain the water, but we don't want to take the water out of the tree because that takes a lot of oxygen out of the atmosphere. With no oxygen, the bacteria don't survive. Just little tricks, you know. But we do assessments and we can figure it out. So at some point we'll replace this tree and we'll get another tree inside here. That's just some of the things that that we do as a tree warden. Another thing is that when we replace trees, we're very sensitive to what type of trees that we transplant right now. We don't want to have a large number of any one species. As you know, we're losing all the ash trees in Connecticut with the emerald ash borer. We lost all the chestnuts with the chestnut blights. We've lost the elm trees with the Dutch elm disease. And that's because we had a monoculture of trees. And the other reason that happened is because of the expansion of global trade. United States, we were a continent, 10,000 years ago. Just the sailing ships came here. Not much was coming back and forth. The insects had no way or diseases to get over here. But once we started shipping products from Asia, and we shipped them in wooden crates and whatnot, when that dunnage sat in the shipyards, insects started escaping, and they had no natural predators here, and that's why some of the insects have got in here. Let's see.
Some ecological change as well. We hear they're moving north.
Yeah, well, they move for the Asian longhorn beetle. It's a big beetle that's from Worcester, Mass. Now, it's a big, clumsy beetle. It can't fly at all. It's just too big. It doesn't fly well, but it moves in wood. So that's why we don't move firewood. You could take one of them and put it in a log and put it a quarter mile down in the ocean for 2 months and bring it back up and it would live. It has to be moved by man. The emerald ash borer is windblown, especially if you have a storm that comes by and the wind just carries them right in here. So Connecticut, most of the towns in Connecticut will have them, and you're going to have to either treat the tree, cut the tree down, or it's going to fall by itself, but they're all going to go.
Can you estimate how old this tree is?
This tree here, I'm guessing maybe 80, 90 years, somewhere around that. Windsor has a very good growing climate for the trees. We have nice soil here, we have good water tables, so they tend to grow well. I do know that we maintain this green and that there's times when we fertilize it. So the fertilizer that goes for the grass goes for the tree and it takes that up. Yes?
I noticed a lot of the pines in Windsor are dying. I don't know if it's that pine wilt, but if it's pine wilt disease, that's a nematode.
Mm-hmm.
It's spread by a beetle and you're not being cut down. These
Yeah.
trees are like everywhere and then it just spreads.
This person I noticed a lot of our white pine trees are dying. The state of Connecticut's been working on it. They're trying to figure out whether it's biotic or abiotic, abiotic being environmental. They haven't quite figured it out yet. I saw a bunch that lost all their needles and I thought for sure they were dead, but I've seen them come back. But they most certainly are under stress. That is an issue. Why don't we head back to the bus? And
Do you have any gypsy moth problems here?
pardon me?
Gypsy moth?
Gypsy moth, there's a question. Do we have gypsy moth problems? They are coming back a little bit. The population is up in Connecticut. If we have a wet spring during the right time, there's a natural disease that will take care of it. It's a fungus that gets inside it and kills it. It's naturally occurring in the soil. It all depends whether we have the rain or not. If we don't, then they have to be treated. We have a couple of shadow blow trees that we planted. The beaver got one of them, but we have one here. And the reason that we plant that, it's a common tree. It's an Americana canadensis. When we hear the word canadensis, in Latin it refers to a colder climate. They do very well here. But what's significant about those is that they blossom the same time they shatter in the river. And the reason they do that, it's all about degree days and warmth. And so when we put the River Park in here, it was important that we did that. It was very symbolic to do that. At the time, our tree warden really wasn't keen on it, but we were up there talking to Mario Zavarella, our town planner. I told Mario I wanted to do it, and he says, Jim, that's a great idea. So they allowed me to put 5 up there. But then at the head wall, he put a pear tree in it. But lucky the MDC took it out because of construction, so I put that, I put the shadow blow back there. But it's pretty cool. It has a nice pink blossom. It's very strong inside our environment. When we do plant trees, it's very important that the trees that we plant there survive before anything else. You will see that when we plant trees, a lot of folks ask, what are those bags on the trees? And we call those gator bags. Those bags we fill with water. Usually if you send someone out to water a tree and you say how much, they just water the surface. Now we can say, fill the bag. And when the bag's filled, we know they're doing a job. But another thing that happens is, we used to dig a big hole and put the tree ball inside the hole, and then put a big water ring around the tree and then put the water in there. A lot of times the trees have a heavier soil, so when you put the water in the water ring, it went right past it, right into the ground, and never watered the tree. This way we know that it takes about 8 hours to drip on the tree, and it gives it a good soaking. Survival's important. You're better to plant 5 trees and maintain them and make them live than plant 20 trees and do nothing. We're gonna get out here. Metal tags on the trees at Loomis, and Steve Morris can fill you in on that.
It's for record keeping. We keep an inventory of each tree, so that we can look back when it was planted and the species. We have a record of it.
Would it identify the species for the general public?
Yeah, it would. If you looked in the record, the number would correspond to the cultivar type of tree.
I got you. Yeah. You're welcome. You need a hand? All set? Okay.
2 more.
Just want to make sure everybody's all set. Safe. Mr. McAllister, can I take your hand, sir? Okay, folks, we're gonna move over this way here. We want to see if we're gonna look at this tree here, and I don't see this too much more in town.
Yeah. Okay.
You folks, you want to come to the side of the tree?
What happened there?
Can anybody tell me what this is here?
It's a bruise.
Right.
What was that?
There used to be barbed wire or cattle fence on our trees, and the old sugar maples have, so there was some type of pasture land here or something at one time. Actually, the road used to run down here before the town hall was here, and there's a couple homes there. That's why you'll see some sugar maples on one side and elms on the other. This is old cattle fence. We're aware of this. We keep an eye on the tree. When we cut the tree down, we know that our chainsaw can't go through this area here because it'll dull our chain. But that's what caused the tree to do that. Same thing happens if you leave you like your dog leash on the tree or a clothesline rope. I mean, we find all kinds of things inside the trees when we remove them, including like the old hose reels that you put your garden hose on. We found them, totally encapsulated. But the reason we're stopping here is we're going to be walking over to that notable tree over there. I consider that a notable tree. It's a Constitution oak, not the charter oak, the Constitution oak. If it was a charter oak, the wood would be in my house. And I wouldn't be talking probably. But I got a little bit of the history on my iPad that I'd like to share with you about that tree, how it came into being. So actually, the tree was planted in 1901. We know that for a fact. All the towns were given, 169 towns were given a sapling of each tree. I think there might be 70 left in the state of Connecticut. There's actually a plaque on it. The Daughters of the American Revolution actually put a new stone on the base of it, and there's a plaque that's growing inside the tree to identify it.
What did you say that tree was?
That's a sugar maple.
How
I love working on sugar maples, especially when you're doing it in the wintertime. In the spring, get icicles on them the next day. They're so sweet when you eat them. So this plaque talks about the rededication of this Constitution oak tree. I picked up a little article I'd just like to read to you about why it's a symbolic tree. We had the Fundamental Orders of 1638 in the state of Connecticut, and then in 1662 the Fundamental Orders were replaced by the Royal Charter. The charter maintains some aspects of the fundamental order, including the right to elect certain officials. In 1818, nearly half a century after the Declaration of Independence, the state convened at a constitutional convention to draft a state government document with its federal counterpart. In particular, former provisions establishing the Congregational Church as the official religion of Connecticut. Now here's the interesting part. By 1901, it was apparent that there were significant flaws in the 1818 Constitution. Senatorial and House districts were set up according to geographic rather than population guidelines. The end result was Union, Connecticut, with a population of 1,000, had the same number of representatives as New Haven, with more than 100,000 residents. In 1901, the Connecticut voters called for a Constitution Convention by a 2-1 margin to vote on to change how they would set the representatives to population. That failed. But after that failed, the folks that put it on gave each town a tree who participated in it, and every town had a Constitution oak tree, which is a pin oak tree planted in their town. In 2002, Dr. Glenn Dreyer from Connecticut College did a survey of all the trees that were left in the state of Connecticut, and I believe he found 78 of the trees. And what they were able to do was measure the diameter, and I believe the smallest one was only maybe 18 inches, and the largest one was bigger than this tree. And what that showed us from a scientific standpoint is that they all came from the same genetic parent, but their size was different. So we knew that the environment has a lot to do when a tree grows in the favorable conditions where it grows. So it's historical, it's part of our history of our country, and it's a notable tree because they gave it to us to remind us of our participation in that.
That was a state convention.
State convention, yeah, yep. So this would be one of the notable trees that we consider. Another very nice tree that you folks will see often is that cherry tree by the church. In the spring, that cherry tree blossoms. The color of those blossoms really do well with the church.
Can I ask then, for example, these branches which have broken in storms, or have they rotted, or?
No, that's storm damage that broke that. This tree is actually under stress. It's been this way for 15 years. We call it whiskers, or it's actually meristematic growth, but all these whiskers coming out of the tree. When you look at the whole tree, it's all fuzzy, and it's fighting to survive. It's just shooting them out. But we're told by Dr. Eilich Scheigo to not touch them. We used to prune them out, but we leave them there now. We're going to walk over past the eagle. I'll show you the first tree that I was able to sneak on the green without getting in trouble. Actually,
How big would that tree have been when they first planted it?
I think they were just seedlings about this big. That's it, yeah. Yeah, they weren't nursery trees that are 2.5-inch diameter. They're just seedlings. Well, the reason I planted this tree here is because I know that that we took a couple of spruce trees out of here and some pear trees here, and I knew that tree won't be here forever, so I wanted a succession tree. This tree here is going to get probably 50 or 60 feet tall. The reason I planted that is it has red blossoms just like that cherry tree. That cherry tree complements the church, but eventually that tree is going to go. The brownstone's still going to be there. This is a chestnut tree, but it has red buds on it. That won't flower until after the Shad Derby. Now, this year it might be running late, but I know it's not going to flower until after probably the 4th week of May, one of the later flowering trees. But as it gets bigger, it's going to be a beautiful tree. And it also doesn't cast any chestnuts on the ground, which makes my coworkers very happy. They really don't like doing the cleanup on it.
What kind of chestnut again?
Horse chestnut?
That's a
Oh, yeah.
chestnut.
So Fort McNair is the name of the variety.
Oh, it's beautiful in the spring.
it's a hybrid, so it just is developed without the seeds. In the urban environment, seeds and leaf drop and all that are really a major problem for us. If I'm going to plant the tree in the school, it can't have any poisonous berries. It can't attract insects, you know, with the flowers that are going to sting the kids. It can't have barbs on it, you know, like your hawthorns and whatnot. If I go to a place like Phelps Meadow, where we're going to be doing some planting in a wetland, open space area, I'm going to plant trees that have soft masts on it and berries for the birds to eat, areas that they can nest. Even maybe a willow tree stuck in the back of it, just so to attract all the different environments. If you look at Day Hill Road, that's monoculture. We won't do that anymore. But those trees are up there to separate the traffic and direct traffic. Our traffic circles, like on Prospect Hill and Lang Road, especially Lang Road, that has winter berries on it in the wintertime, so you can see it when there's snow on the ground and you don't drive through it. We have a frontier elm in the middle, and we do them to direct traffic. On Hayden Station, we have 2 columnar form. They're narrow form red maple trees, Armstrong maples. So when the traffic is approaching it, they can see that there's something in the road where they normally go straight, and it helps direct them around it. So we use trees to direct traffic. Trees do communicate with each other. They can do it within their root system. A lot of the trees, they don't have to be the same species, but their roots they cross each other. They're grafted to each other. They can share reserves, and if they're the same species, they can communicate. No. All the in the roots of the trees, that's where the hormones are produced for the trees, and hormones direct the growth of a tree. Most often, you go to a nursery and you'll see like a rose tree or a fuchsia tree, and what they do is in the tip butt of a tree, that's where all your hormones are to make it grow straight. So what happens is you grow that stick and you bring it up and up and up, and then you do a terminal pinch. When you do that, there's 2 sleeping eyes, and they come out and they become branches, and then when those come out, they pinch those 2, and now you have 4. When you take those tips away and the hormones away, that's when you get in trouble. The white pine trees in Connecticut, they used to be the king's pine when we first came here. They were used for the ships, for the masts and whatnot. But as time went on, through trade and folks coming back and forth to our continent, the white pine borer came in there. And this is one insect that goes to the terminal of the tree. And you see most of your white pine trees are multi-stem, or we call them cabbage pines, because the insect did a terminal pinch, and now we don't have a single stem tree anymore. So trees do communicate with each other. I try to keep it simple, but your black walnut tree, you probably find out that there's not too many things that you can grow and plant below it. They call the property allelopathic. They have the ability to release a chemical that reduces competition, doesn't allow competition to grow near them. So trees are quite smart like that. But they do communicate to each other, you know, in their scientific way. Yes?
I can't remember whether it's The Secret Life of Trees or what, but have you read that?
No.
It came out a couple years ago, and it's about how trees communicate, how they fight disease. It's really interesting.
Trees do scientifically do that. Now there is a gentleman called the tree whisperer. I know Steve Morris has heard about him. I've heard about him. I've talked to the folks at the experimental station. He says you can feel them and touch them and figure out what they're doing. They tell me there's no scientific proof. I don't know. I know I can touch a tree and tell something about it, but I don't tell too many people. Well, you know, years ago, I worked at Riverview Nurseries for a gentleman, Carl Hamburger. This would be in the 70s. And he was 80 years old, from Germany. He did six-year horticultural school in Germany. I didn't even know they didn't have fertilizer then. They had manure teas. That's how they took care of their plants. But I was, you know, smart punk. I knew everything. Back then, the geraniums, we used to take cuttings. They didn't have seed geraniums. So we'd take the cutting, stick it in a Jiffy 7, which is a little piece of peat moss, and put it into a 3-inch flower pot. Well, Carl, once we did that and they rooted out, he put them all on the bench close. And I said, Carl, you're crazy. Spread them out so we only have to do them once. And he says, no, they like companionship. And I told him he was nuts. Well, he was kind enough to give me a spot where I could put mine out there. You know, and I separate them, being a smart young man that I knew better and I could save time. You know what? Within 3 weeks, mine were all pretty much dead. I actually thought he poisoned them. But I learned that he taught a young man something. So trees do like companionship. Trees are said to be communal, and they are. Trees don't like growing alone. You take that one dogwood tree and you put it in your front yard, it hates it. But a dogwood's an understory tree. It likes the shade. You know, it's like putting an Irishman out on the beach. They don't like it. Okay, this tree this is a beech tree. Struggling a bit, but it's a beech tree. This copper beech tree was donated by the Kiwanis Club of Windsor, planted in 1968. Now we do watch our trees, we keep an eye on them. When we have a tree and I identify a tree hazard, it's all based on targets. If I have a dead tree out in the forest, I have no problem whatsoever. It's not going to hurt anybody. If I have a dead tree on the perimeter of an athletic field, I have a little bit more of a concern. When I have a tree like this that can have some factors in it that could injure somebody, and injure means hurting a person, somebody in the transportation system, your sidewalk, your roadway, a domestic animal or property, it's an issue. And we have all those right here. What we've done to this tree is, you probably have to get in the shade, but 2/3 of the way up I have a cable in this tree. Because of the seam on this tree, and you can see it on both sides, there's a seam on this side, and the seam over here, it makes the tree weak. So there's a cable up there holding it together to assist it. We have people sitting here during the concert, and they love to go under the shade tree. Well, you have to take care of a tree like this because your target level, the liability of somebody getting hurt is way up there. We want to make it safe. We don't want to lose it. We want to give the folks shade. This elm tree here, this is an elm tree. In the springtime, we can see the buds coming out, and from the ground we can see the deadwood in that tree. We've taken all the deadwood out of that tree to save it for this year, so the concert goers can sit there and not get injured. We're just gonna walk up to that.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
This is not really just 50 years old.
Oh yes, it is. That's it. These are ideal growing conditions. They have irrigation, and we have fertilizer, and they have Windsor soil. It's actually Windsor fine sandy loam. It's a soil type known nationwide. This is the tree that I was telling you about, the first one that I snuck in here. I think this is about 8 years old, but we had a beautiful elm tree that was there that we lost. So this is a succession tree. That tree's gone, but this takes its replacement. You know, trees, they bring folks together. Like at the high school, we have a beautiful sugar maple tree by the track, the only tree that's there. During the summertime when there's camps, the kids put all their bags down there under it in the shade, they get together. Folks put their water jugs there. It's the only shade they have. So that's a communal tree, that brings folks together. But during the football games, it signals a change of season, the beautiful fall foliage on it. This tree here, I picked this tree because of the bark on it. We look for flowers, we look for bark, we look for scaffolding, the structure of it. It's a nice exfoliated bark on it that we call.
What kind of tree is it?
That's a hybrid elm.
Oh,
They call it a lace bark elm,
oh, okay.
and the Latin name would be Elmus perifolia. We're not going to walk any further, but that one tree over there, that oak tree, that's our United Nations tree. There's a plaque below it, and the plaque, will tell you that it was planted in commemoration of the forming of the United Nations. I think there was 1949, 50, something like that. So that's where we have that tree.
The furthest one?
Yes, that nice big one there.
Beautifully shaded.
And we've been trying in the green. Well, the mayor, he's always said that when we stand at the library, we want to be able to see, the old Arthur's Drug Building down there. So we do try to elevate our trees to do that. It also allows for the irrigation to work properly. But we're getting more replacement trees in there. We're starting to put them in. I had to take a Norway maple down there because of its age and decay.
That was about like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was there.
So that's part of the tree survey. I look at them and I look at them and I look at them, and there comes a point where you have to take them down because if somebody gets hurt, I'm responsible. I'll be in the courthouse. And I don't want to be there more, so I don't want anybody to get hurt.
With your amount that you have without grass around it, is that important?
Yes, so the question is the mulch around the tree. For municipalities, it's so important. Number one, so the guys that mow don't wreck the trees and weed whack them and girdle them. They still run into them with the mowers. But if you want to grow a tree, it's not magic. You got to grow the soil. You have to replicate what happens naturally in the forest. You have a town green. You put herbicides down that kill all the broadleaf roots and whatnot. That has an effect on the tree. The grass takes the water away from the roots of the trees. It's competition. But more so than that, the wood chips create an organic zone, horizon in the soil, where there's a lot of mycorrhizae and insects and fungi that work in with a symbiotic relationship. They have a relationship with the tree where they work together. They help the trees take water, take minerals. Those rhizia will break down complex compounds, the simple elements that the tree can use. They can't use it in a complex form. So it's a relationship, a symbiotic relationship they have. You don't grow plants, you don't grow trees, you grow soil. And that's why we do that. We do that to enhance it. The soil below, all that mulch is beautiful. Loomis does a very good job at that. They're probably the best I've seen around. And you don't make mulch volcanoes. God don't make them mulch volcanoes. It kills the tree. You want to be able to see the root flare of the tree. And basically, you know, what happens in common terms, you take some firewood and you lay it on the ground, it rots, right? After a while. Well, the tree trunks, that part of the tree, is not designed to live in a wet environment. The roots are. The roots do well, and the root flare is a transitional zone. Once you get above it and you get up to the tree, you start holding mucky, wet soil around it. You're gonna start rotting that wood and killing that tree. And the life of the tree is only a couple inches deep. Everything that makes a tree grow is on the outside, not on the inside. So the mulch is very important.
Some people put the pine needles around pine trees. Is that hazardous or okay?
No, pine needles are good. Down south they use pine needles around trees for mulch. They use it for weed control because the pine needles have those alleliopathic qualities that inhibit other plants from growing, so they use heavy pine needles down there. Actually, on the white pine trees, they do it for themselves. That's what the needles do there. They stop competition. We're gonna head back to the bus. One thing that's very important nowadays is called Right Tree, Right Place. Connecticut Tree Wardens Associations of Connecticut we're really pushing that. Recently, our attention's been brought to the power line, the distribution system in the state of Connecticut. Very important. A lot of folks working home. There's a lot of elderly folks that stay at home. Power is very, very important to have. We have one of the most mature forests we've had. The state of Connecticut was clear cut around 1850. We only had 20% was forested. So the forest that we have now is a natural forest that came back. Well, under our utility lines, we have forests everywhere. And they get into the power lines, and folks are very disturbed about the trimming that's done. The trimming that the power company's done is regulated by PURA, the Public Utility Regulatory Authority. They specify how much they can cut and really when to cut. When they have power outages, they have to report these outages, and the utilities monitors that. And if they see an area where the power's out a lot, they'll direct them to take care of that circuit. And basically what they do, there's always questions. Will they take care of the trees that go to my house? They won't do that. What they do first is you have your transmission lines that comes up to your substation from where it's generated. They clear those first. And then out of those comes three-phase or backbone. When you look at the top of the pole, you'll see 3 wires coming down the pole. That's three-phase. They're going to clear all those first. That three-phase is considered a circuit. That circuit might end in the middle of your road because it can come in from the other side. So you'll see them trimming, and they'll go halfway down your street, and you say, why haven't you done any more? That's because that's where the circuit ends, and they're told to trim the circuits out. From those, when you look at that three-phase system, and you look at a neighborhood, say like Plymouth Street, or you can go down Palisado Avenue, and you look at Buckland Way or streets like that, you see a single phase coming off them, one single line. That single line can feed probably 100 or so homes. So they're going to do the backbone first, the three-phase, and once that's done, then they're going to do that area. What bothers me, and it happens in most towns, and in Windsor, is that the tree wardens don't have any part in the site plan approval. So you'll still see that trees are planted under the power lines, and we're creating the same problem. And when you build a home in Windsor, they say you have to have 2 trees in your front yard. They put them under the power lines. We do have trees that will grow into the power lines. We have lists of them that are acceptable there, that don't grow that high and won't get into them. So we've been working very hard on that to have resiliency. And that actually came from the two storm panel. When we had Storm Sandy and the October snowstorm. They had a 2-storm panel, and they had a recommendation 23 by the panel that said that the commissioner of the DEEP would set up a state vegetative management task force. Myself and 19 other people got selected to be in that task force. And we still convene trying to come up with plans where we can maintain our notable trees, our old trees, maintain our forests, and yet provide the power and transportation for folks. You know, after that storm, when our streets got shut down, the governor realized that if our streets are blocked and there's a hurricane that comes by, nobody's going to get into the state of Connecticut. We all forget what the highways used to be like when they first put in, and they've been grown in, so that's the reason why he's cutting them back. But another thing that they found out is that there's less deer strikes in the wooded areas. When the woods are right next to the street, we have a lot of deer strikes, but now that there's an open area, a space between the trees and the woods, there's less deer strikes between the deers and the cars. They can see them coming through that space, and they just don't shoot out like a bullet. This is the Veterans Cemetery, the town of Windsor. Town of Windsor Public Works maintains this cemetery. We have irrigation here. We put the headstones in. We don't put the markers of the flat stones. We don't do that. We put the headstones in here. The headstones are free to any veteran. Now, a veteran can be male or female. It doesn't have to be a stone for a man. You have to be a veteran. So you can have a headstone for a man, a tablet for a man whose wife wasn't in the service, and she would get a flat stone or a marker. Or his wife could be in the service and she gets a tablet, and he cannot be in the service and he gets a flat stone. But it's a little bit of history about how we do it. This cemetery here is a formal cemetery. We have everything balanced in here. We have 2 flagpoles on this side. From an architectural standpoint, we have 2 columnar form sugar maples. Those are sugar maples. So those 2 trees are your sugar maples, but through genetics, they have a columnar form. And that matches the flagpole. On these hills here, we have 5 cherry trees. That was a project that Ray Donahue from Pequannock did. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to have 4 trees symbolizing the services, the branches of the services, and 1 tree for their wives. But back then, women weren't in the military, so we changed a little bit. But that's why that tree was planted. We're going to walk back a little bit further. These are all Norway maples that were put into the cemetery. Back then, I don't know what thought was put into it. I can't say. But eventually, some will have to come out because there's going to be some burials where the folks are going to have to go next to the road where the tree is, and so the tree will have to come out. So as time goes on, we rethink of how we do things. We learn from what happened in the past, and we won't. That lot over there, that's our East Street lot. That's going to be where the expansion of the cemetery is going to be. So we won't plant that the same way as we did this. We're going to have to keep the trees away from the roads. So if you come down here and you wonder why you see a tree taken down, either it's coming out because it's not doing well, or it's coming out because we have to do a burial.
May I ask how it is that Windsor has the wherewithal to have a veteran cemetery? Most towns in Connecticut don't have it.
I'd have to say it's your town manager, Al Ilg. When Al Ilg was our town manager.
Yeah. And when was that?
Well, he was here for 32 years. He was my town manager.
I don't live here.
Yeah, he was my town manager when I was here. I want to show you. There's folks that see there's a young tree coming up that we planted over on that side over there. I don't know if you folks can see it from here. We'll get closer to it. That tree is an ash tree. That tree we will treat, and we will save that tree. That tree is known as the Eisenhower ash tree. General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, he was born in Denison, Texas, and on his property there's an ash tree there. They've collected seedlings from the ash trees, and they've grown descendants from it. We'll take a shortcut this way. So that tree is one of them seedlings that was raised from President Eisenhower's birthplace. And town of Windsor, our previous public works director, heard that they were giving them to the veteran cemeteries in the VFW, and so we took one of those trees and we planted it. So that would be a commemorative tree. Did you folks in the back hear me about that, the Eisenhower tree? No. Okay. This tree that we're walking to over here, we'll keep on walking, is an Eisenhower ash tree. Now, as I told you, all the ash trees in Connecticut are going to die unless you treat them. If you don't treat them, they're all going to die. Either cut them down or treat them. Eisenhower, our president, 5-star general, had an ash tree on his childhood birthplace. And that ash tree, they're taking the seedlings from it. They were given to the VFW, another organization similar veterans organizations. The town of Windsor got one of the ash trees. We planted it. That ash tree we will treat and we will save. The reason Eisenhower wanted to do that is because of World War II, these trees are planted in memory of all the World War II veterans. So this ash tree here is a symbolic tree that was planted for that reason. And then I must say, being a lifelong resident of Windsor, he's the only president I ever seen alive, in person. Behind John Pierce School, there used to be Sidney Hayden School where I went to kindergarten. And back then we didn't have 91, and Eisenhower was coming from the airport down 75 to go to Harvard. Yeah, and they washed all us little kids out in front of Audrey Chevrolet's, and I saw this big man of statue, Eisenhower, going by in the motorcade, and I just couldn't believe it. I could see him, So all I can see is this big gentleman, but that's why we planted this tree here. So again, when we stand here, you can see that this is an urban environment, and yet right next door is a natural forest succession.
Jim, which one is the ash tree?
Oh, right here where Mike is. This right here is, yep. It's a seedling that I believe we planted about 9 years ago. It's doing very well. We can say right tree, wrong place, because when they plow the street here, they tend to plow it up this way, but they know to stay off it now and not hurt it. But this is the Eisenhower ash tree. And actually, this section of cemetery, and Steve Morris knows well, between our cemetery and Riverside Cemetery, this is the pauper section here. There's graves here with no gravestones. There is one stone in the area up there that we exposed about 10 years ago. There's a shrub around it, you couldn't see it, but this is a pauper section of the graveyard.
What is that mold and stuff that grows on all the trees?
It's for the most part, it's lichen. It doesn't hurt the tree. No, it's an algae and a fungus, Steve? The lichen that grows on a tree.
It's like algae.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt the tree. It just lives there. That's where it lives. It doesn't take any of the resources from the tree. Hey, Steve Morris, gentleman with us from Loomis, he pointed out something very good. The trees that are lining the cemetery here, those are Norway Maples. We don't plant those in Connecticut anymore. They're on a state list not to be planted. They're very invasive. They take off pretty quickly. There's a lot of talk about native and non-native trees. Sometimes our inland wetlands agents want us to plant native trees, but honestly, folks, there's not a lot of native trees per se that are left. The trees that were here prior to the deforestation in the 1850s was our natural forest. That forest came through 10,000 years of generation where they just went through their normal cycles. But once we cut those trees down, and folks came from other countries and brought trees in here that crossbred with them, and the trees that were advantageous took off, the natural forest that we have is not here anymore. We do know some of those species, but we don't really have that anymore, so we really try to plant what we have. We're going to be heading up to Northwest Park via Day Hill Road. Very common tree that's planted is the Pear Tree, the Bradford Pears, Chanticleer, Aristocrat Pear Trees. That tree was like the Norway Maple. The tree's going to solve everything. It's going to be a beautiful tree. They're actually becoming a nightmare for us up there. They're growing up into the street lights. And worse than everything else, and it happens where I work at Public Works, where we have a cell tower. It happens at the chamber. We have those pear trees there. The birds and the squirrels eat the seeds, and then they pass the seeds out, and they get all over the cars and they make a mess. It's nothing but a nightmare for us. The reason they do that is because birds are attracted to that. Just like bittersweet, birds are attracted to red berries. When they see the red berries, they take them, they eat them, they use them for energy. In the wintertime now, we have starlings that are overwintering, we have robins that are overwintering, and they also feed on these berries during the winter months, so they contribute to it. I know at Public Works in the fall, we all get so darn mad because they just poop all over our cars. It's just amazing the mess they make. So in the urban environment, when we plant trees, we have to think about that. And that's why we don't do a monoculture planting anymore. At some point on Day Hill Road, I don't think it's going to happen because the pear trees, they seem to be bulletproof. You can run them over and they come back up. But if a disease comes in and gets into them, we're going to lose them all. That would be a big expense. And more so than that, it takes away, some of the effects that the trees give you. We say the trees are communal because they bring folks together. They also provide shade. If you're shading your air conditioner outside with a tree, you're going to have a 10 to 15% savings on it. It's not going to have to work that hard. The town of Windsor got America the Beautiful grant. I was able to plant 36 trees around our public buildings, primarily the schools. That was my focus because our schools didn't have air conditioning in them. I didn't realize it. I was just planting trees haphazardly around the schools. And one teacher came out and said, "Could you plant the tree in front of my room? The school's not air conditioned." Hey, I work for the town. I didn't even know it. I was embarrassed. But I said, most certainly. So we got this grant, and we did quite a few of our schools and some of our public buildings, and we planted these trees specifically to shade the schools. And we picked a deciduous tree because we wanted to shade it in the summertime, but we wanted to lose its leaves in the wintertime so we could take the heat energy inside our buildings. And there's a lot of different reasons why we plant the trees that we have. Luckily now we're getting some AC in the schools, so that should help the folks out. Are there any questions that I could field as waiting out there?
You had mentioned that the town is treating that Eisenhower ash. Can you treat a tree that has the ash flora, but it's not dead, it's still like half alive? Would that
No, the question is if a tree is half infested with emerald ash borer, can you treat it to keep it alive? That would be called a curative application, and pretty much not. If you have an ash tree right now, you want to do a preventative and start injecting it so it's inside. It becomes systemic. That's how they do it. And they have good chemicals out there now that won't kill the honeybees. We're very sensitive about what we apply in Windsor. We actually don't do any applications. We had a commercial person come in and do our elm tree, but we're very sensitive to the environment and what we're putting down. And they do have chemicals now for treating the emerald ash borer that are even allowed to use on public property in schools. So that was a good question. There's another question earlier. A gentleman asked me about roots on the sidewalk and what can we do with that. Well, that's always an ongoing problem. Sometimes you'll see we'll have a company that comes in and pumps up the sidewalk slabs. You'll see 4 holes drilled in the sidewalk, and they'll pump it up. They can put concrete underneath it, and they'll lift it up that way. Sometimes we do some root pruning. We haven't done it in a while because we're concerned about tipping the tree over. But most certainly, right tree, right place. After World War II, a lot of our urban forests were planted, and that's what they did. They put them between the sidewalk and the road. Well, it's just natural for those roots to lift them up like that. You get to some places like maybe West Hartford where they call them structured cells down below the brickwork. They have processed stone, but they modify it with loam, and they have a nice big well. It's a new way of planting trees. They tend to stay down below, and they won't push it up. Certain varieties won't do that, so it's always a constant problem because that becomes a hazardous tree. The tree does not have to be dead to be hazardous. When I took my test to become a tree warden, there was a tree that was as healthy as could be, but it was pushing up a sidewalk. That's a hazardous tree. You have to remediate that. And they asked me what I do, and I said I'd root prune it. I can root prune that tree because of its size and take it out. So a healthy tree can also be a hazardous tree. More questions?
Yeah, how much work do you farm out outside of town?
How much work do we farm out for planting trees?
Do you have to hire people?
No, we do our own tree planting, except for like a state job. Prospect Hill Road, that wasn't funded by the taxpayers in town, that was funded by the state. They had their own architect come in. They did the planting. I wasn't part of the inspection. Let's see, last week I had to pull 3 trees out. 2 that were under the power line, request by a homeowner. 1 that was right in front of a pedestrian sign. And when I pulled the trees out of the ground, they had the baskets in them. So they come in a wire basket. The basket has to come off the tree when you plant it. They just drop it in that way and go. And 20 years from now, the tree dies prematurely, and that's because it was planted improperly. We have an excellent tree crew in our town. I select the trees. If I call a nursery and I order a tree, I get what they give me. You go down, next time you go down to Geisler's, you folks go down there between Geisler's and Dominic's, there's a oak tree there. You'll be able to see it's just a narrow deciduous tree. Just two stems on it, 2 leaders. It's supposed to have 1 leader. if that tree came to my place, I'd reject it or I'd cut one of the leaders off. So when we buy trees, we buy the right trees. We don't take any garbage, we send it back. I pick the trees out, we get the right trees, we plant them right, we get them established. That's probably one of the reasons why that elm tree got established at the town green, because we're very sensitive to how we plant our trees and maintain them and water them and get them established. And you might see a branch that's bent on it a little bit, but not broken, but it doesn't look right. Well, I don't touch it. I don't touch it until the tree gets established. Like I said to someone earlier, folks always want to prune a tree. My belief is, yeah, we're going to go there. We're going to show you something. You know, I'm not going to come around and nip your baby finger off to make it look better. So, you know, but don't do it to our trees. The reason we're coming out here is that trees can be invasive for many different reasons. And what we're going to show you out here is, you see all the trees on the side of the road here that are growing? We mow the grass and then the farmer plows the field. Those are all pear trees. Those are all from the seeds of these trees here. The birds come, they eat them, they sit on the power lines, they take off. A lot of birds, when they take flight, that's when they'll poop. Well, that's what happens there. So we have a big stand here, and we have a big stand down the end. So trees can become invasive in different ways, and that's one way it is. Also, some of the taller trees on this street are blocking our street lights here. We had steel poles here that have all rusted out, so we're replacing them with these aluminum poles. To take a pole down and put a replacement pole up, it costs us $7,000 a pole. So we want to protect, you know, our infrastructure. So when we take a tree down by a pole, some folks will get really mad, but they don't understand what we're doing. You're not going to miss a tree. We're going to get more light on the ground, and we're going to protect the infrastructure that we put in. That's just being responsible stewards of the hardware that the town of Windsor has. Again, on the left here, you can see all these pear trees. So these are all Bradford pear trees, the same one that's on the street. They're invasive. Something that you wouldn't normally notice. These cherry trees on the hill here, they call that pollering. They're pollard, they're foreign. They stopped doing it because the director up here doesn't like that form of tree, so they're going to go wild. But that's a form of pruning. It's like, you know, like pulling an animal, pollering a tree. So on our right up here, that's a sugar shack that Friends of Northwest Park, very instrumental in getting that built. Money that they raised, and that lumber on the outside's all from the town of Windsor municipal trees that were in our municipal properties. Yeah, they're ornamental pears.
All right.
On Day Hill Road, those are all ornamental pears.
They don't produce an edible fruit.
No, not an edible fruit. They're actually in the calorie pear family. That's the family that they're in. And the pear trees have different forms. The first pear tree that came out was a Bradford pear. That was this save all of all trees, but they collapsed in the snowstorms. There's an aristocrat. The Bradford pear tends to have big fat leaves, and the aristocrat has pointed leaves. And the aristocrat, just by the way it grows, is more like a triangle. So I had two together during that October storm. The one that was like a triangle shedded all the snow, and the one that was a broadleaf and all clumpy branches and all that just failed right next to it. So there's different varieties that do better. I mean, myself in my environment, I wouldn't plant them, but you know, if you want a tree in your front yard and you want it to grow, you can throw that in the ground like a dart and it's going to grow. On the Wilson median, we plant those in the Wilson median. They're pretty darn durable down there. We lose maybe 9 or 10 a year to automobile accidents. Now that particular tree, to streamline what we do, we don't take those trees out of the basket because we know they're going to get run over. They'll live for so long, and so we pull the baskets out. But still, it's important that we have those trees in Wilson. There's not a lot of trees down there. We have to break up the architecture down there and cool it. I know I have to work a lot with the utilities on trees that are on that are on the power lines. And there's a lot of folks in the cities that have that. And if I had an 8 or 9 story, apartment complex, and I had a big gnarly Norway maple that was shading that building, and they were worried about their power lines coming down, I'd say leave the tree, because that's going to affect too many people. You have to be fair about what you're doing and make sure that they have the same, have the same comforts that we have. Trees do really help shade the buildings. So we really look at the trees that we plant, right tree, right place. Planted here, they're both sugar maples. This one here is more of a columnar form. This one's more spread out. Sometimes you'll hear them refer to sugar maples as a sugar bush because it looks like a bush. It doesn't have a central leader. This more has somewhat more of a central leader. That particular maple tree over there, that's the kind of stuff a nursery might send you. That one I didn't plant. I don't know where it came from, but that has what we call codominant stems. It doesn't have a single stem on it. If you stay here, I'll point it out to you. When a tree is young, and we get it from the nursery after 3 or 4 years, we start doing some corrective pruning on the scaffolding. You'll see that there's a dominant stem here and a dominant stem there, but very little central leader. It's called two codominant stems. Trees want to have one dominant stem. So on this particular tree here, we would tip that branch back and slow it down so the dominant stem could take off from it. And like I mentioned, down by Doms and Geislers, you're going to see a pin oak tree. It's going to have 2 stems on it. Remove one of them stems and the stems will be fine. That's why I mentioned to Bill Generis that when we get our trees, I go to the nursery and I get the trees because we're not going to get garbage like that for taxpayers' money. We're going to plant the tree, we're going to do it right, and we're going to make it grow.
Well, do you know which one, does it matter which one you want to trim?
You always try to take the ones on the outside out because the center stem is always going to be your leader inside the tree.
So you can tell which one naturally wants to be the center.
Yes, yeah, be that one that's straight up in the middle.
Right.
When we look at trees, we always make sure that trees grow straight like this. If I go to assess a tree and I see it like this or it's off-centered, then I have a problem with it. But all trees have a center stem in the middle. They all reach towards the light. No trees grow left or right. The reason you ask about mulch around the trees, the reason you put mulch around trees is this is what lawnmowers do to trees.
Oh, gee whiz.
They run into them when they're young and they tip them over. And you can see that this happened a while ago. If I was to go and assess this tree and someone says there's a hazard with it, trees are phototropic. They always reach towards the light. Although this tree's bent, the top's straightening out. It's reaching for the light. So I know it happened 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Tree's not going to fall over right away. Although it's not good. There's not many roots on that side, but that's how we determine safety factors on trees.
So you're retraining?
Retraining?
Retraining
Yeah,
the
we'd have to stake it.
No, they're mowers.
Oh no, you can't retrain them. So this is a bear oak. Bear oak. I'm sorry, bear oak. It's let's see. This tree has been listed as a champion in the American Forestry Association's National Register as big trees. This tree was the biggest recorded living specimen of its species as of November 26, 1988. This is a bear oak tree. I'm not too sure who planted it. I don't know a lot about it. I do know that when we had the October storm, it really collapsed the tree, and Steve Marquita from the Current mentioned that we were going to be losing this tree and whatnot. But I wouldn't have anything to do with that. I knew it wasn't going to happen. You can see where I've made some cuts on the branches on the ends where you see them rotting out, and I've tipped them out and whatnot. What we'll do next is, when we cut them like that, there's a lot of multiple stems that come out. We'll train it to 1 or 2 stems now that it's healed itself. When a tree gets hurt or injured, you just can't go in there and prune the heck out of it. Just take the injury out of it and let it heal itself. Let it balance itself out, and then we can save the tree. So this tree's doing well. It's back on its own again.
How about the other tree that's behind it? Isn't it obscuring it?
It is. That spruce tree. Yeah, that spruce tree was naturally in the park. It's somewhat of a healthy tree. It does obscure it a bit. This maple tree over here, I keep an eye on this maple tree. I watch it every year. It's they use this for part of the sugar maple program. This area right here on this tree, you see all the bark is? We call that a cat's eye. At one time, a limb was taken off the tree. It was taken off properly, and it encapsulated itself and closed itself right up. This is perfect seal on the tree. It's done very well. It was cut right. So this tree is doing well this way. Now, I showed you all the sugar maples that I planted up there. That's in an urban forest environment. This section of forest over here, this here has your natural forest succession inside these woods here. So if I was looking at that woods there, and I had a management program for that for this section of woods, there's a bunch of sugar maple trees in here, and what I would do is I'd do a release cut. I'd take some of the non-sugar maples out of there so those trees can grow. These here, these are a form of elm tree. These are Siberian elms. It's a species of elm. We know these are Siberian elms here. But if you stay out there, let's see. This is a sugar maple. This tree here is a sugar maple. And there's sugar maple dotted throughout this whole area that they tap. We'll start taking some of these non-sugar maples out of here. If we were doing a forest stewardship cut on this piece of property, and we'd do that to release these sugar maples to keep them. Whenever you own property, whenever you own a forest, you have to have a stewardship program for it. You have to have some intention of what you're going to do with it. You just can't let it grow. In this case here, I would take the trees for maple syrup because we have the facility here. Folks might want to save some of the trees and take lumber out of them. They might want to make wildlife habitat out of it. They might want to cut some of the trees out for firewood. They might have different reasons they want to do it. But by having a stewardship program, you're able to help generate the revenue to maintain the land that you have. Land is liability no matter what you have. You have to be able to manage it, whether it's insurance or whatnot. So at least have a plan in your head. Even if the plan is, I don't want to do anything, but you really need to have a plan when you manage your forest, you know, as we do here. Some people, you know, they'll get peat moss in some areas. It's just different things that they do. So this area, we've always looked at it and we've thought about that. You know, these Siberian elms, they're pretty invasive. They grow pretty quick. I mean, it's not a hazard, but I do notice that this tree, you know, has a decay spot on it. And then if I look at a tree like this tree's a two-stem tree. Trees don't grow out of the ground with two stems. They grow out with one stem. And what happens is as this tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger, trees keep on growing and pushing, and eventually it starts pushing itself apart.
What's with the vines?
The vines.
Do you want to get rid of them?
Vines are a nightmare for us. They're also a nightmare for Eversource, the vines in the state of Connecticut. There's been an explosion of the Asian bittersweet. It's been a real problem. Again, red seed, birds like it, they're attracted to it. A little bit of the climatic warming's made them advantageous in growing. I know our seasons are a lot longer. I'm not going to argue whether it's global warming or cyclic warming or whatever it is. I just know it's warmer. You know, working for the town all these years, I can remember 20 years ago when I used to drive a truck on Washington Park, Stroll Park, and plow the snow off. We always had ice by December. Driving a truck on it was never a problem. I haven't seen that in a long time, in many years. We could skate on the Farmington River down to the Connecticut River as kids, but we have these cyclic changes. It doesn't happen anymore. So the warming has an effect on our environment. It gives them a lot longer to live. You don't have the cold winters that knock them dead and whatnot. But the vines are a big issue in the state of Connecticut. And we're really concerned what's going to happen when all the ash trees die and it lets the sunlight come down to the forest floor, because then they can jump up. And what they do is they'll put added weight on the tree, which is not good, but they really compete for the sunlight. They don't live off the tree, but they compete for the sunlight.
They really like those Siberian elms.
It's just where they get established, just by coincidence. So I tell by the buds, the nice pinkish color to the buds, rosé, and the buds are pointed on it. But as legend or folklore, or as truth has it, when these are in flower, the shatter in the river. And it also produces a small mass. I think you can eat it. It's like a little inkberry. Berries aren't that bitter. You can eat the berries off of this. Indians usually eat these berries. But this is a shadblow, that Amelanchier canadensis. Beautiful tree.
Is it also called serviceberry?
Serviceberry, exactly. Yep. Yeah. The guys who work don't know it, so every now and then I'll take some of the berries and I'll eat them and I'll pretend I'm sick. But I'm not. Being a prankster. But yes, thank you for asking that. almost passed us. That's our town tree as far as I'm concerned. Shadblow, serviceberry, shadblow.
Does this one have pink or white blossoms?
White. Yours are white?
Yes.
Yeah, they come white and pink. The ones
I wanted pink, but the nursery gave me a white one by mistake.
Well, they do the same thing with like the ginkgos. When we buy a ginkgo biloba, they live forever on the street. We don't want a female plant, we want a male plant. The brown berries on a ginkgo biloba, the fruits, they fall on the ground. If you step on it, you think you walk to a dog park. That's what it smells like. Yeah, they're very stinky. So,
What's this called again?
shadblow serviceberry. Actually, if you ever go by the Marriott when you're coming up Day Hill Road, where they drop the folks off, there's going to be a tree standing out by itself with a scaffolding like this. That's sort of a bare scaffolding. That's a ginkgo biloba. Beautiful tree in the urban environment. Takes all kinds of hard environments. It just does a beautiful job. And there's a very small area that it's planted right next to a sidewalk, and it's doing wonderful. And doesn't even push the sidewalk up. We actually planted one at our community center at 330 in 330 Windsor Avenue in Wilson. When you get up towards the center by the Caring Connection, it'll be standing in an island by itself. Very noticeable. It looks like a scarce tree. Pardon me? Yeah. The biggest one that I know of is if you go across the 140 bridge and you get up by the main fish market and you take a right. That young one is with a small diameter. That one over there, small diameter, is a young one. We did a replacement tree. So we really keep the trees up in town. They do a good job, and really have to thank the town manager, Peter Souza, for recognizing this and enabling us to do this, and our public works director. All right, folks, I guess we're leaving. Hey, Chuck. I had to
How you killed that tree down?
No, come on. I want. Hey, this is Chuck Drake, my good high school friend. Remember I told you about Chuck and the maple sugar program and how it makes me cry that Chuck digs into all my babies and he puts holes in them. And I told the folks that the tree warden in the state of Connecticut has to give permission for anybody to tap a tree, but you don't need that. You're good to go.
We started tapping before there was a tree warden.
Yeah. So that worked.
So we were
worked out very good.
But if he didn't tell you, some maples here in town are in decline, and that tree right there is a prime example. And the reason why is the town is so good at putting rock salt down, but then they also plow it up. And in this situation, they plow it right underneath that tree, and that's dying from salt.
Sugar maples aren't salt tolerant at all. They don't like it, and that's why we don't plant them in the right of way anymore. But I don't want to lose them, so that's why I want to put 2 on the green, by Milo Peck. So we'll always have sugar maples in the town. And this is not for today or tomorrow or 20 years from now. This is for 70, 100 years from now. It's for the future of Windsor. Same as the golf course. When we purchased that golf course, that's for the future of Windsor, the open space. That's why we do that. Right. Looking forward for everybody that lives here in the town of Windsor.
But also some of the trees that have been taken down in town, especially if you remember there was a spruce behind the eagle on the green. Yeah. That spruce is now part of our sugar house.
Oh, yes.
It's a major beam, and we used that spruce to make the beam, and we realized that it was bigger than we needed by engineering specs. So we then cut it a little bit smaller and made it into rafters. So all the wood that's in our sugar house is actually from trees that were harvested here at the park or within town, and we milled them ourselves. And so everything in there that's wood, other than the plywood, we manufacture from trees that we got from town. So everything got recycled.
We need to thank you.
No, you thank these guys.
Actually, Chuck and I came a long way, because when Clover Street School first opened, we went there, and we thought we were big shots. We were able to go to the office and get the little red wagon, and then put room 108, room 13, room 14, the crayons and the pencils, and Chuck and I would walk down like big shots after lunch. Yeah, bringing them to the rooms. We thought we were kings.
Supply deliveries.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason you went to the office?
Well, no.
That's the reason we got this, because we were always in trouble.
Yeah.
We wanted to keep an eye on it.
That was during peacetime, when we weren't in trouble. Yeah, remember, when you spell the word principal, use P-A-L, because he's your pal. That's what I was told. But I never practiced it.
Okay.
Good seeing you, Chuck.